All right, sequence D. Sequence D. This is very similar to sequence C, except for how it ends. Sequence D is literally just a second attempt to solve the main conflict. But what makes Sequence D unique is how it ends in terms of the character's relationship to the main conflict changes significantly at the end of the sequence. But Sequence D begins where Sequence C left off, which is a failure to solve the problem. Okay, but they have a new approach. That's basically what they're going to do. They have a new objective, and that objective is to seek to solve the problem, and it should follow logically in terms of what the character is ultimately trying to do. Gosh, we could call it a super objective if you wanted to. I mean, what is the character trying to do throughout the entire film? Chief Brody is trying to protect the town. So whatever objective he has in Sequence D is an objective to try to meet that, to serve that objective, that super objective. In this particular instance, he and Hooper go out. They know they haven't got the shark, so Hooper's got an idea. Say, let's go check. Let's go check out and see if we can't track this thing down ourselves. So they go and try to track to find the shark themselves. What they're looking for is proof. They need proof. The mayor has proved to be quite a difficult person to convince. So I think that's their next objective. If we can't kill the shark, we just got to keep the people out of the water. In order to keep the people out of the water, we gotta convince the mayor to let Brody close the beach and save these people until the shark goes on its merry way. No food, it'll move on. Okay, that's their next approach. Does that work out? Well. They find another boat. They find a dead body, yet another victim of the shark, and Brody finds a tooth, a giant tooth. Not Brody, Hooper. He finds a tooth, and that gives Hooper a real clear idea of how big this shark is and what they're dealing with. So this is when he says it's a great white and it's a big one. They try to go to the mayor to convince the mayor of what's really going on and give some exposition. Similar to the Matrix at this point in terms of exposition, because Hooper goes into this detail about what attracts a shark. It's people. It's things thrashing in the water. It's a great white. How does it hunt? Why is it here? And it's going to stay here as long as there's food. And the mayor's not having any of it. He's proving a tough customer to try to convince. And so the big day arrives, 4th of July, everybody's on the beach, and, tension is high. People don't want to go in the water, but eventually they do. And Spielberg does a little clever storytelling where he puts the shark fin in the water, and the audience is thinking it, everybody's thinking it, the shark's going to show up and eat somebody again. Well, he creates a broken expectation when some kids basically pull a prank, and there's no real shark. It's just a couple of kids with a cardboard fin, and they almost get themselves killed, and we think, crisis averted. But here's what comes, and this occurs at roughly the midpoint of the film, and that's what it's called. We call it the midpoint. And it is the point in the film where the conflict proves to be deeper than expected. In Jaws, it's when Brody realizes that the shark could have killed his own child, and it's set up. We talked about it earlier, but that really solidifies Brody and what it is he's trying to do. If he had any apprehensions about being the sheriff or asserting his authority, he gets over it real quick right now, because that feeling of a paternal instinct of protecting your children really kind of takes over at this point. And in the scope of conflict, the midpoint, we always say that the scope of conflict is revealed to the main character. The reason they couldn't solve the problem before was because they didn't really know the full extent of the problem. They didn't understand it. In the case of Jaws, what Brody didn't understand was his own relationship to his authority, his ability, his commitment, his own fears. He's literally afraid of the water. He doesn't like it. He doesn't like it very much. He's a fish out of water. God, it's another Jaws pun. But he is a fish out of water. He's just some guy from New York who shows up in this town and, he doesn't even like boats. Well, at this point, he is... this is a turning point for him. He realizes how deep the conflict is. It's not just about saving town. It's about protecting his own family. And that's the midpoint of this film. And it happens, roughly, 50 minutes, an hour into this film. The end of sequence C, or D, sorry. This can get quite confusing. Wait, I'm controlling the wrong one here. Okay, pause it, see. 1 hour into the film, right in the midpoint. In the Matrix, sequence D is, after Neo is sort of given the backstory and realized where he is, he's taken into some training. And this is just simply a training sequence. His objective is to get up to speed and to ultimately see if, Morpheus's intuition about him is right. So, he learns Kung Fu, Taekwondo, they do some fighting, he does some jumping, which is ultimately how this sequence, here ends. And let's get us there. He goes into the Matrix, it's just the training sequence as he learns about his abilities and how the Matrix works and sort of how everything functions. There's kind of a twofold midpoint to this film. There's two plot points that happen because there's two lines of conflict that both reveal two different kinds of, two midpoints. One of them is the fact that Cypher is working against them, and it's revealed to this audience, pretty much halfway through this movie, as you can see by the slider here. I'm right pretty close to the middle, and Neo goes through this, the training. Is he the one? He seems to be talented, and then it's revealed that Cypher is working with the agents. The conflict is revealed to the audience to be deeper than expected, right? That's the midpoint. Now, Neo doesn't quite know this yet. It's dramatic irony. We know more than the main character does, but it very quickly, plays out when these guys show up to do, to go into the Matrix and to visit the Oracle, and that is where the second sort of revelation happens in terms of the midpoint, where the scope of conflict is revealed to be deeper to Neo specifically, and that's when the Oracle basically quizzes him about what he thinks, if he's the one, and she doesn't lead him to any questions. She just simply asks him, and do you think, are you the one? And Neo says, no, I'm not the one. And she says, sorry, kid, you got the talent, but I don't know what you're waiting for. Now, we assume as the audience at this point that she's telling him that he isn't the one, and that what Morpheus is putting his life on the line for is for naught. And, that's a huge revelation to Neo. He thinks the problem really is him. He's the problem, and he's not about to let anything happen. And we'll see going forward in the story, he's not about to let Morpheus sacrifice himself for him, because he ain't the one, or at least so he thinks, because the Oracle never says he isn't. So in the Matrix, there's a couple of plot points that occur in two different storylines that really typify the midpoint of the film, really exploring the depth of the conflict. You got Cypher and his, the fact that he is working with the agents to, and Neo, who thinks he's not the one, and this is all a big mistake, and it's, he doesn't want to be responsible for it. So that's how the Matrix ends in terms of sequence D. Once again, to recap, in terms of the structure, it begins with failure in sequence C, or I guess their second attempt, whatever the objective is in terms of the second attempt to try to approach and deal with the problem. We see how that unfolds, the consequences of that, and we end up at the midpoint of the film at the end of sequence D. All right, I hope that sort of clarifies things. I don't think I've left anything out, other than one other thing is, at the midpoint of the film, there's also something called, a reflection, the mirror opposite of the end. Now, as you're developing an idea, I always say, kind of know where you're going, know what the end of your film is, and that's simply important because, it's hard to decide how to get somewhere, or what route to take if you don't know what your final destination is. You might not know, or you should just choose something. Choose a destination. It can change. Going through the course of developing the idea, you might realize, well, you know what, where I really want to end up, and you can change it at that point. But once you change it, you got to kind of go back at the beginning and make sure you design the storytelling and the plotting to go directly towards that new ending. At the midpoint, there's kind of this mirror opposite of the end. Now, not to give away Jaws, but Brody, he kills the shark. I mean, I'm sorry to spoil that for you, but he kills the shark in the end, and it occurs in elaborate fashion, and we'll get to that sequence. But I want to kind of pinpoint how what happens at the midpoint is a mirror opposite of the end. Okay, at the end, Brody is on a sinking boat with a gun. He's in the water, and he is brave and courageous as he's shooting at this shark to try to kill the shark, and bam, he blows up the shark. Okay? At the midpoint, what we see is his son on a sinking boat in the water. The shark is approaching and ready to attack. It kills one person, and Brody is on land running to try to save this kid. That is a reflection of the end. Brody, in the midpoint, is powerless as his son is on a sinking boat and at the mercy of the shark. At the end, it's Brody who's on the sinking boat, but he isn't at the mercy of the shark. He's courageous and keeps shooting until he gets the shark. It's interesting the way it's designed that way. In the Matrix, the mirror opposite is, in the end, Neo is the one and flies off into space as he's, mastered the Matrix and, seems invincible. At the midpoint, as he's talking to the Oracle, he is the most vulnerable, and he thinks he's not the one. He has the most convincing opinion of himself at this point that he is, in fact, not the one, which is the opposite of where he ends up. Narratively, this is important. You kind of give your audience a frame of reference in terms of where the story is going to go from there. You kind of clarify what the problem is. You give the audience, a sense of the opposite, or, the most grim opinion, or the grim aspect of what the story is about. And then you show how the conflict is sort of reversed by the end, or the main character has overcome whatever obstacle they're faced with, whatever problem seems most important to them. In the case of Brody, his child is being threatened by the shark. It's most important to him, and in the end, it's the mirror opposite, and he overcomes the shark. Neo is standing before this oracle who seems to know everything, and he thinks he's getting the bad news, and which is the most important to him in that moment. And at the end, he proves that he's the one. Hopefully, that gives you a clear idea of how Sequence D is structured, and the significance of the midpoint of the movie. All right, sequence D. On to sequence C next.